I still remember the night when
When
something
you feel
subtle yet
comfortable in your
irreversible
own
shifted
skin,
between us.
that's when you really
The house
start
was
to glow.
quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and refuses to let go. She was standing near the window, the soft glow of the streetlight spilling over her like liquid silver. She wore one of Dad's old shirts, loose, half-buttoned, sleeves rolled to her elbows, the fabric swaying gently with the rhythm of her breath. When her eyes lifted to meet mine, she didn't flinch or step away. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, "It's late. Go get some sleep. Liam." But there was something in her tone, something worn, uncertain, that kept me rooted where I stood. I never expected things to unravel the way they did. When Dad married Clara, I was 19 and still clinging to the edges of familiarity, trying to convince myself that life wouldn't shift too dramatically. He met her on a corporate retreat in Denver, one of those weekend getaways meant for team bonding and bad coffee. A few months later, she was standing in our living room, smiling politely, holding a tray of muffins she'd baked herself. By the time the wedding happened, our house had already begun to change. The old family pictures disappeared, replaced by framed prints of mountains and oceans, symbols of new beginnings, I suppose. But every time I looked around, I could still feel the ghost of my mother's laughter lingering in the corners. Clara wasn't the kind of woman you could ignore. She had a calm elegance about her, tall, slender, with the kind of quiet confidence that drew people in without effort. Her hazel eyes seemed to hold too much, as if she could see through every facade without judgment. She wasn't loud, she wasn't showy. She was the kind of person who filled a room just by existing in it. And maybe that was what unsettled me most. At first, I thought the unease would fade, that I'd eventually get used to her voice echoing down the hallway, her perfume lingering on the stairs, her handwriting on post-it notes stuck to the fridge. But then came that one weekend. Dad left for a firm retreat, leaving just the two of us in the house. I told myself it was fine, just a couple of days. But time slows down when there's tension you can't name. She offered to cook dinner. I told her she didn't have to, but she smiled and said, "I want to." The kitchen felt smaller that evening, the air thicker somehow. She moved with an easy grace as she chopped vegetables, her movements quiet and deliberate. She poured me a glass of lemonade, the faint scent of mint filling the air. We talked about school, plans, music, ordinary topics that somehow carried weight. And every time our words faded, her gaze lingered a second too long. It wasn't seductive. It was searching. Later, we found ourselves in the living room. She sat curled up on one end of the couch, her feet tucked under her, her expression pensive. Then she asked something that caught me off guard. "Do you resent me for being with your father?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. I hesitated. "No," I said honestly. "I don't resent you." She gave a faint nod but looked away, her fingers tracing invisible shapes on the cushion. "You hardly speak to me," she murmured. "Sometimes it feels like I'm invisible." I wanted to say something to fix that heaviness, but all I managed was, "I guess I just don't know where I fit anymore." She smiled, sad and small. "I don't think I know where I fit either." Something about that moment rearranged the way I saw her. She wasn't just the woman who married my father anymore. For the first time, I saw her as someone human, lonely, uncertain, pretending that everything was fine. That night, I couldn't sleep. When I came downstairs, the lights were dim. Clara stood by the same window, wearing one of Dad's shirts again. The moonlight brushed against her, outlining her figure in faint silver. When she turned, our eyes met in the half-darkness. "You should be asleep," she said quietly. But she didn't move, and neither did I. The days after that felt strangely heavy. She was kind as always, asking simple questions, making breakfast, smiling when Dad called to check in. But there was something unspoken between us, lingering beneath every glance, stretching the silence into something that felt almost alive. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found her humming softly while flipping pancakes. Her hair was damp, loose around her shoulders. When she placed a plate in front of me, I said, "Thanks." She smiled faintly but didn't look up. "No need to thank me," she said. "We're family." I didn't know if she was reminding me or warning me. When Dad came home that Sunday night, everything seemed normal again. Clara laughed at his stories, touching his arm lightly, smiling in all the right moments. But when I passed her on the way to my room, she brushed against me, her voice low and almost playful. "Did you sleep well while he was gone?" she whispered. I froze. She walked away before I could answer. The next few weeks blurred together. I threw myself into work, taking extra shifts, staying out late. Yet somehow she was always there, in notes left on my desk, in freshly folded clothes, in the faint scent of her perfume that clung to the hallway. "Eat something," one note said. "Laundry's done," said another. "Don't forget your charger." Each one ended with a tiny smiley face drawn in pen. Then came the night everything truly changed. The sky was a bruised shade of gray, the rain slamming hard against the windows. The power flickered on and off as thunder rolled across the distance. I was in the garage fixing my bike when I heard the door creak open. Clara stood there, soaked to the skin, barefoot, her hair plastered to her face. "I locked myself out," she said, her voice trembling more from something deeper than cold. I handed her a towel, trying to focus on anything but her eyes. She stood there, clutching the towel, water dripping to the floor, and whispered, "I miss being seen." The words hung in the air, heavier than the storm outside. "Really seen," she added softly. "Not as someone's wife. Not as something pretty to show off, just me." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said quietly, "I see you, Clara." Her breath caught, and for an instant, she looked almost weightless, like someone who'd been underwater too long and had finally surfaced for air. She stepped closer and touched my cheek, her fingers trembling. "This isn't right," she said, voice breaking. I nodded. But deep down, I knew that something had already crossed the line. The next morning, everything returned to normal, or at least it pretended to. She made breakfast, poured coffee for Dad, asked him about his meetings. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes never found mine. Days turned into weeks, and whatever existed between us was buried beneath layers of routine and silence. One afternoon, I came home early from class and heard faint sobs coming from the laundry room. When I opened the door, Clara was standing there, mascara smudged, her hands clutching a damp shirt. "He forgot," she said, laughing bitterly. "Our anniversary. He said he'd make it up to me, like it was some rescheduled appointment. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, awkward and helpless. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. Her body shook against mine, her voice barely audible. "You make me feel like I still exist," she whispered. That night became another turning point. Nothing happened in the way stories usually suggest. No confessions, no stolen kisses. Just an unspoken understanding that things had changed, that we were both walking a dangerous edge and pretending not to notice. Then one evening, everything fell apart. Dad found my phone on the kitchen counter. I hadn't realized there was a photo saved, a candid picture I'd accidentally taken of Clara. She was laughing at something I'd said, her hair caught in the sunlight. "It looked too intimate, too personal. Why do you have this?" he asked. I couldn't find words. My throat went dry. Clara's response was immediate, steady. "It's for my birthday slideshow," she said quickly. I wanted to include some pictures from around the house, but Dad's expression didn't soften. Something in his eyes shifted that night. Suspicion, quiet and sharp, began to live between us. After that, Clara grew distant. Carefully, deliberately distant. She stopped lingering in rooms where I was. Her words became shorter, her smiles mechanical. Every trace of what had existed between us was wiped away with surgical precision. Still, I could feel it. The silence that buzzed beneath her restraint. The echo of all the words we'd never dared to say. The night before I left for college, there was a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find her standing there, her hands trembling slightly. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "I know," I replied. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm not," I said before I could stop myself. She smiled faintly, a sad curve that seemed to hold both gratitude and regret. "Take care of yourself, Liam, and don't lose yourself trying to make everyone else happy." Then she turned and walked away. Her footsteps faded down the hall, and that was the last time we spoke. Years have passed since then. Yet every now and then, her image returns. Standing by that window, moonlight spilling across her face, eyes carrying the weight of things neither of us could change. Love doesn't always arrive dressed in fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it sneaks in quietly, through the cracks of loneliness and longing. Sometimes it hides in guilt, in silence, in the spaces between what's right and what feels real. She once told me it was wrong. And maybe it was. But still, in that small, unspoken way, we both allowed it to happen. And neither of us ever truly walked away from it.